Hello and welcome to Orbiting Brick. In today's video, we're continuing to explore the celestial bodies ended by the New Horizons planet pack, and today's target is Serran, or Serran, or Serran, whichever. I don't think there's an official pronunciation guide, but yes, we're going there. Right now we're launching the lander separately, as it's a pretty significant vehicle, because Sarin, as I'll be pronouncing it, well, it's a fairly large moon of Sona, which is the planet, the gas giant, which Kerbal is made a moon of in this planet pack. This being quiet for a bit as I get drowned out by these engines. But yeah, Serran has not only high gravity, but also a decent atmosphere. In fact, at some of the lowest points, it gets dense enough and actually contains enough oxygen to be breathable to Kerbals, though our landing site for this mission will be too high in altitude. But yeah, this is a strange looking launch vehicle, I realize. It has the classic Titan 3 style staging, with those outer cores igniting on the launch pad, and then an inner core igniting later in flight. We're about to ignite the center engines, and then just in the outer cores. And you may notice that, just the title and thumbnail aren't too optimistic about this mission, and that's because, here's a major flaw. I grossly underestimated the amount of motor propellant needed, since I both have a module manager config that decreases the strength of reaction wheels, and I also have this engine igniter, blanked on the name of the mod for a second. I have engine igniter, which means you need ullage to ignite most engines. You need tons of motor propellant, which I did not include enough, and that's gonna lead to major issues later on. But right now, I'm completely oblivious to that, and we continue on our trajectory towards Serran. I believe I've already changed my pronunciation of it. Again, there's no official pronunciation. Yeah, we're just doing a mid-course correction here. And yeah, whilst I did talk about how large the celestial body is, it's nowhere near the same size as Kerbal, so yeah, we can use a fairly small launch vehicle to get off its surface. And there you go, you can see the rather boring looking celestial body below us. And the lore, and just with going based off the science descriptions and the in-game planet description, apparently Serran, again, different pronunciation of it. It once had its one-time biosphere like Kerbal, but due to changing geologic conditions, the temperature rapidly dropped, most of the atmosphere was lost. It's now a dead world. And then you'll see that, granted this is not the official config by any means, but I did use some parallax configs for this. I decided to do only... It's a very barren planet, very barren moon when we get there. Anyways, with the lander in place, we now need to launch a crew that will use it. And so we're sending it to crew members on this fairly standard launch vehicle. Yeah, you can see our two Kerbals there. And not much really to say about this launch. Again, it's a standard rocket, engines both from Restock and from near future launch vehicles. A command pod is from sorry about that, is from a near future spacecraft, I believe. Yeah, we're about to adjust in the outer boosters. There we go. And so, the ascent from here now is, again, standard. You can see the interesting configuration of the spacecraft. There's gonna be some docking that has to be conducted later on. Now we're almost in orbit. In fact, we'll complete our orbit using this stage. There we go. And we can also deploy the electric generation of this spacecraft, which are two RTGs. I don't usually use them for crewed spacecraft, but I decided to be a bit different. I also put them on these extending arms, so that even though I don't have Kerbalism radiation enabled, we can get the radiation farther away from the crew capsule. Although they might be more able to... Well, I'm unsure if that actually improved the radiation environment. Oh. Honestly, yeah, this might actually make the more exposure to radiation for the crew, since previously they, like... Okay, look, it may not be the best design, but then again, radiation doesn't matter in my current install, so I guess it's fine. Yeah, doing some transposition and docking, first maneuvering that habitation module, and then redocking to the transfer stage. This means that the crews can be eyeballs in for all the major maneuvers, but still have access to some more living space once we inflate that habitation module, as you see here. And as you saw, the command pod doesn't have a docking tunnel, so I'd have to do an EVA. I did not actually do an EVA, but there's airlocks to provide for that, and there's plenty of handholds where I feel like it could reasonably be done without use of a EVA pack. So, sorry about that. So I messed up my, my transfer, which meant we had to time warp 3 days before conducting the maneuver, which I guess was fine since we had the life support for it, but may contribute to failures later on in the mission. And also the auto time warp, just a continuing theme throughout this mission, is the auto time warp messing up and throwing us off from our maneuvers by a bit, which will cause additional problems. But we are able to execute our carbon escape burn. I just realized, wait. I could have sworn the Kerbal IVA portraits look different. Strange. Am I going insane or... I only just noticed that now. I literally did not notice it before. That's strange. I guess texture replacer bugged out. But anyways, we keep ignoring this shape-shifting Kerbals or whatever. We can conduct a mid-course correction that expands most of that lower stage, and begin using our Wolfhound stage. Or it's at this point that we run out of mod propellant, which is very bad, since, as I said earlier, it's essential for controlling the spacecraft. However, it's pretty much too late to turn back now, so we continue on to Serran. Again, yet another pronunciation. And you can see the grey moon line in the distance. And you can see the details of its surface. And we can conduct our orbital insertion burn after having to fight with the engine because it refuses to ignite when its fuel is not properly settled. Yeah, we did waste most of our ignitions trying to get the engine to ignite, which will cause even more issues. Now we can insert into orbit, and after that begin plotting our rendezvous with the lander. Just conducting yet another maneuver, well, another set of maneuvers, to get a close encounter, which again wastes more ignitions. And yeah, this is gonna be something I do a lot, where it's orientating the spacecraft using the engine gimbal. Eventually we are able to dock, in fact mainly using the RCS that still works on the lander. But once we dock, the two crew members can transfer over. Again, could be done with a EVA. However, I just didn't want to do an EVA right now. Also, since again, this can reasonably be done using handholds, and they are provided, but they are non-functional in game. And we don't have the model propellant for the Kerbals to use their RCS packs. So we can undock, and then damage the solar panels on the docking module. Not ideal, however we still have 2 left. We can then conduct our deorbit burn. You can see how I've already deployed the landing legs. That's to ensure that... to ensure that they don't break TV repairs right before we land. And yet again, the Kerbal IVA portraits have changed, and that might be how they were at launch. Again, I didn't find this texture replace with this bug, I'm only seeing this now whilst recording the commentary. I'm going to speed this footage up. But yeah, this is the entry and descent procedure. So we have the air brake deployed. You might be concerned by a lack of heat shield, but the atmosphere is pretty thin, so we can survive the heating just fine. In fact, we'll actually conduct the engine burn the moment plasma starts to appear. As you can see, it's starting to get, I believe, a bit toasty on the engines there. And you can definitely see it now. So fairly soon now we'll begin our engine burn. This will hopefully slow us down to a speed where we can safely deploy the parachutes, which will do most of the work for the landing for us. That's not how I meant to say that, but I think I got the point across. Now we have those drop tanks to provide some additional delta V for descent. Now, I swear this worked just very well in all the testing I did. However, for some reason, there's gonna be some difficulties deploying the parachutes. This was not the first attempt at landing this. So those drop tanks are now empty. We still have that core fuel tank. And I've now unintentionally staged the parachutes. And they're gonna deploy and immediately get destroyed. And this is not what I want to happen, so yeah, I made a quick save. And reloading to it, I was able to just in time prevent one of the parachutes from deploying. Which means that we can deploy it when actually it can survive deployment. And I'm now trying desperately to get the parachute to deploy. I'm burning all the remaining fuel in the descent stage. I have now run out of fuel, and at this point I'm panicking because I swear this worked last time. However, just barely the parachute is able to deploy. And we're able to slow to a somewhat safe landing speed. And not the most upright landing, but RCS and SCS is able to correct that. And that means we're able to do our EVA. And ladders are being ladders as always. The Kerbal somehow survived that, but I swear again it worked better in testing. Nonetheless, we can plant our flag. And then once we get our engineer on EVA, we can begin to deploy our surface experiments. Some of these are Restock, Breaking Ground, and some of them are from Blue Dog Design Bureau. And we can deploy them once we do some shuffling around of our inventory, and temporarily place the experiment control station on the ground. Yeah, soon enough, we can start to set up the surface experiments. There we go. First applying the RTJ. I'm using engineer so we get some more electric charge from it. Very satisfying sounds there. We can then deploy the experiment control station, and apparently get very mad at it. We can also deploy the antenna. Followed by carrying some science experiments over. And that custom backpack is a part of Benji 10's spacesuits mod. I believe it's historical spacesuits, something like that. You can find it on the forums pretty easily. But yeah, if you're using one of the Apollo spacesuits and have two non-RCS spec or parachute items in your Kerbal's inventory, you get that custom backpack. Anyways, we can also deploy this camera, and with that our surface station is set up. We can pose for a nice photo. And then begin to prepare for Ascent. And that involves removing everything that's not necessary on the Ascent module. That includes the ladder, which you can see being removed. Also includes the air brakes. And with all that dead weight removed, we can now lift off. And speeding this up, it's a fairly standard Ascent. Just from a far more boring slash body. Again, you saw how bare the surface was. Partially intentional, partially not. And the ground, like the actual tessellation, is the same config used for lathe. I just removed all the just plants and rocks and stuff, which I think gives the slash body a interesting appearance. You can see this visual glitch where the color randomly changes as we ascend. And yeah, you can see that this square of a lighter rock below us. I'm not sure why that happens, but it's actually, I've noticed it on a bunch of other slash bodies that have atmospheres, but it's always, it's most noticeable here. So if anybody knows how to fix that, please say that in the comments. Anyways, we can continue our ascent, and actually using mob plan for this last stage, we can insert into orbit. And have a very thin margin of delta V left. Yeah, using a significant amount of our remaining delta V, we can try and get a close encounter with the command and service module. However, yeah, again, auto time warp messed us up, so we're gonna have to conduct most of the maneuvers using the command module, which again lacks attitude control. And try and squeeze out the last as much delta V as possible, and end up removing basically all the remaining parts from the lander. First, the parachutes, as well as the batteries, and the now empty life support containers. and even one of the solar panels. However, again, that doesn't change the fact we just straight up blacked out a feed, and that doesn't change that our command module cannot orientate itself. And yeah, you can see that it's basically impossible to control it. We end up running out of ignitions on the Wolfhound stage and activate the actual service module engines. However, even then, our reaction wheel has ceased to function, so we can't orientate ourselves. And so, that means this is where we're stranded right now. I am unsure of how to proceed from here. Please, leave your suggestions for how to rescue these Kerbals in the comments. They are running out of life support and have just a few days left on their lander. And there's more on the command module, but both of them lack more propellant in their EVA packs. So yeah, please, leave your suggestions in the comments. I'll try and rescue them. Probably next episode. Yes, it's not normally a series, but I guess I'll be doing a sequel in that case. But yeah, sorry to leave this mission on this not a successful note. But yeah, please send suggestions for how to help these Kerbals. Yeah, I want to thank you for watching. Please like and subscribe, and goodbye.